I'm middle-aged, I live in Middle England and earn a middling salary, writing travel books and teaching geography at Oxford University. My life is extremely comfortable, or rather it was. It all changed when I started writing about the world's most extreme environments. The more I suffered in these godforsaken places,
the more I saw that it's the hostile landscapes that have shaped man's existence on Earth. One of the most hostile is the vast area that has kept East and West apart. Crossable only via the network of trading routes known as the Silk Road, this wilderness of mountains, plateaus and deserts is one of the least populated on Earth. But life is sustained there. Just what sort of life, my publisher felt was up to me to find out. The Tibetan Plateau, the highest inhabited place on Earth. On average, it stands 5,000 meters, over 3 miles above sea level. On the western edge of this plateau stands Mount Kailash. Sacred to Hindus, Sikhs, Jains and Buddhists, this mountain is the site of one of the world's most extreme pilgrimages. In order fully to experience life on the roof of the world, I had decided to attempt this formidable trek. But at this altitude, every lungful of air you breathe contains only half the amount of oxygen it would at sea level. I've spent my life in the lowlands of Europe, and I'm not exactly fit. I knew from the outset that even reaching Kailash was going to be tough, let alone completing the pilgrimage. My trip began 1,000 kilometers east of Kailash in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. You need to acclimatize to altitude, and at 3,500 meters, Lhasa is about as high as you can fly to from sea level without the risk of death. I had to spend at least 3 days here before heading off for Kailash. After a quick scootabout on a rickshaw, my guide, Gilsang, suggested we take in the best view of the city from the top of the Potala Palace. The problem was there were 2,000 steps and no lift.
Easy walk?
No. For me, it's also not very easy.
Really, for you? You find it
Yes.
difficult?
So I think for you it's also difficult. Very difficult. But we can go slowly up, then it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Slowly does it. Very slowly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for a rest already.
Doctors in England had warned me to take it very easy for the first couple of days, and I was rapidly understanding why.
I think your heart jump is faster than normal.
Yeah. Boom,
But-
boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
I wasn't a third of the way up, and it felt as though a small gang of manual labourers had started to make structural alterations to the inside of my head. The higher I went, the harder they pounded.
Could I take you up?
With more than halfway to go, Gilsang thought it best to give me a helping hand.
I would do for you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel
Because,
terrible. But you are the Tibetan.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe I should have tried this after being here for a week.
I wondered what sort of man would want a house this high, and what sort of men built it. What was certain was that I was no match for either.
Whew.
I was struggling with the 2,000 steps and acutely aware that this was nothing to what I would have to endure in Kailash.
Oh, man.
Now we are
extra 20 meters.
very good views from here.
Yeah, really nice view.
The view might have been amazing, but I was in no condition to take it in. My lungs were on fire and my head was bursting. The only thing that I could think about was the long list of altitudinal ailments my doctor in England had warned me about.
Nausea, vomiting, dizziness, difficulty sleeping, nasal hemorrhage, and then there's a whole range of more serious type things like pulmonary, but can't even say it, problems with your lungs where they fill up with moisture and moisture water, and actually you can drown effectively, and similar swelling of the brain. And the only way to deal with these things, if you think you've got them, is to go down. And if I haven't reached maximum height going towards Kailash, and I have to come down for health reasons, that would be it, mission over.
By the next morning, I still wasn't feeling great, but I agreed to Gilsang's suggestion to a walk around the Jokang temple. Walking around a holy site, known as Kora, is a form of prayer for Buddhists, and they don't do things by half.
How many times do people go round on this Kora?
Yeah,
It turned out that 5 or even 9 circuits was normal.
not double.
I could just about handle the walk, but in front of the temple gates, I began to get seriously worried.
How many prostrations do people do?
I think average is 500 each day.
500 a day?
Yes.
Gosh.
And for those young people, then it's over 1,000, I think.
People in my country go to the gym and
Yes.
work out, but no need here, is there? Because it's it's almost like press-ups and squat thrusts at the same time.
But
That's
then
why.
afterward, they get very good stomach.
Yeah,
Yes.
no fat people in
No.
Tibet.
You see, just like me.
Yeah, exactly. Unlike me.
I was beginning to get the measure of your average Tibetan. Evolved to high-altitude living over many millennia, they were fitness fanatics with insuppressible appetites for pain. I can't remember the last time I did a press-up, and still less a sit-up. And I've certainly never done more than 20 on the trot. Gilsang proposed that we made a few offerings to the spiritual guardians, by which I understood her to mean that I was going to need all the help that I could get. I lit my candles more in desperation than in the hope that any of the Buddhist deities would want to help an agnostic Westerner. On my final morning in Lhasa, the weather turned. I was feeling better. My red blood cells must have been multiplying, improving the efficiency of the oxygen supply to my body and adding a bit of a spring to my step. But I still needed to find the right mental attitude for the ordeal ahead. I felt a gesture was in order, some sort of sign to show my commitment. I wasn't fit, and I wasn't used to altitude, and I had no faith. But the haircut somehow made me feel a little more ready for what lay ahead. That afternoon, I left Lhasa and started the 7-day drive across the highest plateau on Earth. My 1,000-kilometer journey to Mount Kailash had begun in earnest. From Lhasa, there was a long, slow climb up onto the Tibetan plateau proper. I teamed up on the first leg of the journey with fellow geographer and veteran Tibetologist Daniel Winkler. Daniel was going to spend time with a family of Dropka, nomadic pastoralists living at the very highest edge of sustainability. It It wasn't long before he started putting the wind up the new boy.
If serious altitude sickness kicks in, there is not even a choice. You gotta go down, otherwise you'll die. So, and you have, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 hours or something like that. And that's real, yeah.
Going down is all very well, but there was a big problem here. We were on a plateau. And though it's covered in hills and mountains, actually losing height fast is difficult. In fact, if I did get altitude sickness, I was already more than 8 hours away from anywhere low enough to make a difference. As we climbed, signs of life got fewer and further between. This village was the last major settlement for 1,000 kilometers. At this height, there are obviously no trees for fuel, but most people had turned their extreme altitude to their advantage, at least in terms of tea making.
Amazingly hot.
These solar-powered kettles were everywhere. The intense radiation, augmented by the thin air, could bring them to the boil in just 10 minutes.
It's instant.
Look at that.
Wow.
Brilliant.
That same radiation was about to play havoc with my newly shaven head.
We're at altitude.
The exploding sun cream was yet another reminder of how high we were. It hadn't been opened since it was packed at sea level, which meant that the pressure inside the bottle was greater than the pressure outside, and it was trying to equalize. You didn't have to go all that far to see evidence of why Tibet is so high. This alien, apocalyptic landscape was shaped by intense tectonic activity that is still going on. And occasionally, dotted across the plateau, that activity erupts through the surface in the form of hot springs.
Wow. Ooh. It's going really deep down in there.
Yeah, it must do.
We're just a little bit north of the pseudo-line between the Eurasian plate and the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
So that's where all this activity comes from.
And right on the edge of the plateau.
Yeah.
And look, within 5 meters, it's turned into ice.
And that's in April, you know, in December or January, probably the ice is right here.
Yeah, even closer still. Wow. Extraordinary place.
Around 50 million years ago, the landmass we now know as India crashed into Asia. This continental collision caused a huge pileup. The rocks in the crunch zone buckled, folded, and formed the Himalayas. But it didn't only create the highest mountain range on Earth. As the Indian plate continued to drive northward, it pushed under Tibet, thrusting it up towards the heavens. It's a process that is ongoing. The highest plateau on Earth continues to rise at about 4 millimeters a year. Three days after leaving Lhasa, we arrived at the Sochen Monastery. I don't know whether it was the 700 meters that we'd climbed or the intense cold, but I was feeling rank.
My forehead is all completely bunged up. My nose. Oh, a very bad headache. And aching down my neck. Feels like a cold, but it's got to be altitude as well. Can you tell me if...
The next morning, I sought medical advice from Dr. Rinzing Namgyal. Far from the advanced and certainly fatal altitude sickness I'd imagined, Rinzing diagnosed a minor cold.
I'm sort of surprised he's saying it's a light cold, because as far as I'm concerned, it's a pretty heavy cold.
The cure was a wrap of herbal tea. And there was no excuse to go down. We pressed on. Daniel had arranged to join the pastoral nomads at the time of their move to summer pastures. Given the sparsity of the vegetation, I was astonished to see huge herds of wild donkeys and smaller bands of antelopes.
very barren. It's not desert yet, alpine steppe.
And this is as high as people live, isn't it? I mean,
Basically, a couple 100 meters higher maybe. Here we are on 4.9, I guess, right now.
yeah.
Yeah, so at 5.3, 5.4, there's no more vegetation runs out, so
Really?
nothing to feed anything anymore.
Mind you, it's not a lot of vegetation here, is there?
I simply couldn't understand how these people survived in this vast brown wilderness. So when Nudrup invited me to stay for a day or two, I quickly accepted.
Nick, Sekiore.
Nick, how do you do?
Pleasantries over with, we wasted no time in getting on the move.
Tent, is it?
It's heavy.
Very heavy.
What do they actually sleep in?
Mostly they're coats.
Yeah.
That's the sleeping bags. And a couple carpets maybe down below, or sheepskins.
Have we asked if they've got enough for us? Because we'll freeze to death in this stuff.
The agenda was to unite Nudrup's sheep with his yak herd. They had moved to the summer pastures a week before and were being tended by Lamo, his neighbor. It was the best part of a day's walk away. After 8 kilometers, I could discern little change in the vegetation. And 6 kilometers on, when we'd arrived, I was still puzzled. Perhaps it was down to my untrained eye, but I couldn't spot a single difference between a winter and a summer pasture.
Thank you.
But the accommodation was certainly different.
Excellent.
Ja,
Ja.
Thank you very much.
Unlike the solid winter quarters, the summer residences are tents, manufactured from yak hair. Perhaps because they're for summer use only, they're anything but airtight.
Quite nice, huh?
And when I came to bed down in the men's quarters, I started to worry about whether my synthetic fleece would cope with the nighttime temperatures, which could drop to as low as -15.
He's putting 2 on.
My anxiety only increased when Nudrup cocooned himself in not one, but 2 huge sheepskin coats.
And he disappears. But the secret ingredient is this, isn't it? Any chance of,
Nudrup somehow sensed I was feeling a bit chilly, and he generously gave up one of his fleeces.
Thank you very much. I'm all right, Daniel. What are you going to do?
I'll see what else is here. There's another one.
Gosh, they're heavy too. Really heavy.
The next day, I set about trying to work out how it is that these people managed to scrape an existence from this remorseless, barren plain. From the moment the animals were released from the pens to graze on the surrounding hills, it became clear that nothing is left to waste.
This one? No? Too wet.
The first chore of the day was to bag up the overnight dung.
It's quite a tricky business, actually.
There are no trees at this altitude, as there is neither sufficient oxygen in the air nor moisture in the ground to support anything more than the thin and sparse carpet of grass.
You've got to get your eye in.
Dung is the only combustible fuel on the plateau.
So,
The mainstay of the nomad's livelihood is the yak. First domesticated 3,000 years ago, this is the bovine maestro of high-altitude survival.
actually, I tell you what, just going up that gentle slope was exhausting.
I wish we had yak blood. They have 3 times the amount of blood cells than ordinary cows.
That would be nicer too, yeah.
Not only does the yak have supercharged hemoglobin, it has also evolved a huge windpipe, lungs and heart to further maximize the take-up and distribution of oxygen. It is not for nothing that the Tibetans refer to these beasts as the treasure of the plateau. They are beasts of burden, they provide 2 different types of hair for cloth and tent making. They're meat to sustain the dropka through the winter. They can be traded for grain and other essentials not available on the plateau. And finally, they daily give fresh milk. But it's not just yaks.
Even she gets out of breath.
Yeah.
Lamo needed a seasoned sheep's stomach to process the yak milk into the ubiquitous yak butter. They were utterly dependent on their animals. So each night, the small and the vulnerable were sorted into strange mud ovens to keep them warm and safe from predators. Though the principles which determined who went where somewhat eluded me.
Okay. Here you go. I don't understand this. There you go. That one there, and that one in there. In that one, okay. Whites, blacks. Can't be boys, girls, because there's 3 of them. Sleep tight. It's good to be out of the wind.
As I sat down for my final meal with Nudrup and his men, I realized that life here is a stark equation. No animals equals no people.
This has got to be the very edge of altitudinal existence.
It looks like an old sheep to me, is it?
It was. Yeah.
Everything's so finely tuned, every aspect of their animals is used. The old bit of carcass for the bellows, the dung in the fire.
I mean, without animal dung to burn, they'd be really stuck, wouldn't they? Because there's nothing else to burn.
The hides for their coats, the hair for the tent, every aspect. And yet there's so little pasture.
Many thanks. Totally well, not even dried, actually.
That was a big bite.
The following morning, as the slow cycle of daily dropka life began again, I was getting ready for the off. If animals had helped Tibetans at these altitudes for thousands of years, I realized that they could help me in my bid to conquer Kailash over 5 days.
I know.
That's not better.
Well, it's the business. That's better. The real thing, that's warmer too.
Having agreed a fair price, the coat was on, and I was as ready as I was ever going to be.
Yeah, good.
It was mid-April, but at 4.5 kilometers above sea level, the plateau was still in winter. I'd left Daniel and the dropka 2 days before, and we'd seen almost no one since. With only 100 kilometers to go until Kailash, I came across an oasis of life as surreal as any I've seen. What I first thought was ice turned out not to be. This was more evidence of just how violent the tectonic upheaval was and is. This crust on top of the world was sea salt.
This used to be the seabed. I mean, we're now 4,445 metres, 4.5 kilometres above sea level. And the sea's come up to meet me, as it were, over a few million years, of course. And intense solar radiation evaporating off all the water, leaving you with this superb white salty surface. How much does a guy like this get paid each day, do you know?
Just 10 yuan each day, I think.
10 yuan a day?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's not much, is it? Blimey.
I've rarely encountered a harsher, more medieval scene. Merely existing on this plateau is so difficult that these people migrate to the salt pan to work for a wage packet of just 30 pence a day. We crossed the Mayom La Pass and headed on up towards Mount Kailash. Regarded as the axis mundi, or heart of the world, by Buddhists, Hindus and Jains, pilgrims walk around this sacred peak in the hope of expiating the sins of this life, gaining religious merit and earning reincarnation as a human being. Each year, Mount Kailash lures thousands of pilgrims to its slopes. But when I reached Darchen, the pilgrimage base camp, I very much got the impression that I was ahead of the crowd.
It's all very quiet, isn't it?
Yes, the season is very early now.
Early in the season, huh?
Yeah.
It was here that I'd arranged to meet my companion for the pilgrimage, Nobu Wangtang.
The first of the season. The good season is about 1 month away.
Is it?
Yeah.
So you reckon we're the first of the year?
Sure. I think it's 3月呗。
It was a bit of a ghost town,
Where is it?
but they were obviously gearing up for the pilgrimage season because we managed to find all we needed for our 3-day trek. The staple in the form of tsampa, or ground barley, protein in the form of dried yak,
How much dung do you think we'll need, Nobby?
and fuel in the familiar form of yak dung.
Well, we're more or less ready now. We ran into a slight problem this morning when we talked to the yak herder, the guy that we're going to hire the yaks off, which is that there's a pass up there, the highest part around Kailash, could be snowed in. No one seems to know because no one's been up there recently. I mean, we are the first pilgrims here. But if this pass is snowed in, then the yaks won't be able to get past, which means either we come back or carry on foot, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
They carry.
We could carry what we can carry.
Now, it seemed that Nobu and I were fairly well matched for the ordeal ahead in physical terms. But beyond playing at home, he had a further advantage over me. As a lifelong practicing Buddhist, he had faith. The afternoon before leaving, he insisted we visit Tenzing Wangdak, Darchen's reincarnation Lama.
Gosh, you have to be very fit to be a monk here. Yeah.
His main piece of advice was to shut out all material thoughts and focus on the self.
Your family, your car, and your office is not important. There's
Your family?
no use.
So do not think of
Yeah.
your car and
Yeah,
your
yeah,
office.
it's,
Just
yeah.
concentrate on your inner
Yeah,
soul.
when you do Gora.
Yeah.
But I suspected that Nobu's real reason for visiting the Lama was to hone his meditative techniques. The temperature here can drop to -15 degrees centigrade at night, and I'd read that the monks in these parts can tantrically generate heat from within. Nobu had home advantage, faith, and now personal central heating. I was in trouble. It was the day of our departure, and the omens for success were good. A few more pilgrims had arrived overnight, and as the sun hit the tip of Kailash, the temperature soared to a balmy -5. Our herder, Satan, strapped the last bag of yak dung to the back of our yak, and we set off.
Do they sit them down to load?
No.
No? Just stand.
Yak is not a camel.
No, it's not a camel. How far have we come? About 400 yards.
The 3-day circular route wasn't just the longest walk I've ever done. It also involved climbing a further 870 meters to get over the Dolma La Pass. And if we made it that far, there were still 18 kilometers back to Darchen.
Proper
Unfit academics.
Yes.
Used to sitting at our desk.
No, we still
take a lot of books. No?
Yeah, yes. You can't leave them behind, can you, Nobu?
For the first few hours, the visual focus of our journey, the mountain itself, was nowhere to be seen. When we did see it for the first time, it was a welcome tonic.
Oh boy, yeah. Oh, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
As well as being home to, amongst many others, the Buddhist deity Samvara, the Hindu god Shiva, and various Jain saints, this mountain gets much of its symbolic power from being the source of 4 of the world's great rivers, including the Indus and the Brahmaputra. As we skirted the western edge of the mountain, I came across a site that took my understanding of devotion to a new level.
Maybe they spend 20 days.
20 days.
Yes, to finish the prostration.
What do they do with their belongings and their food and things?
Poor. 저런데 디 칼라타한테 드스가 수키. 칼라타 드스키 말이야.
What these pilgrims told Nobu was truly astounding.
Yeah.
Every day?
Yes.
He takes his
their
stuff,
sense to, yeah,
then walks back
come back.
and prostrates to his belongings.
So very, very hard.
Extremely hard.
Sure.
Extremely hard.
If you do the maths, by the end of this 3-week journey, they would effectively have gone round Kailash 3 times, once prostrating and twice on foot. At Tarpoche, there is a huge version of the ubiquitous Buddhist prayer flagpole. Legend has it that the omens are good if the pole is either vertical or leaning towards Kailash.
Yeah.
If anything, I'd say it's maybe leaning that way. Or is it perfectly vertical?
I think so.
And that means no problems, huh?
Yes.
I left Nobu and Satan to their devotions and wandered up the hillside to another prayer site. I suddenly realized where I was. I had chanced upon a sky burial site.
I'm not sure that I should be up here. And there's a couple of Tibetan mastiffs over there who obviously don't like the idea that I'm here, I don't think. But this is an extraordinary place. There are a few birds winging their way back and forth. It's a curious situation because they have special people who cut the body up into pieces and crush the bones so that the birds will eat the lot and carry it all away. And you see no signs left at all except the odd item of the deceased. That looks like a wrap of some kind. And somebody's hat. And for each body there's a little can.
In Mahayana Buddhist beliefs, consciousness leaves the body about 3 days after clinical death. From that moment on, a corpse is truly lifeless. The sky burial struck me as being the final act of generosity, enabling other birds and animals to be nourished by one's remains.
And what a place to go, eh? The Kailash. It's just looking on. Really is the most extraordinary place.
"6 hours, but only 5 kilometers later, I was beginning to wonder if my flesh and blood weren't going to help sustain the local vulture population. We'd reached the height where there was so little oxygen that the body starts to make its own by eating itself. The wind and the cold weren't helping either. My legs were screaming out to stop.
Past the 5,000 meter mark, and
5,000 metres doesn't really sound enough. It's 5 kilometres above sea level, nearly 3 miles higher than I'm used to. And I do feel like my whole body isn't up to it.
I was being beaten by the slightest of inclines. And I have to confess that I started obsessing about an undignified end to my trip around Kailash. I pictured Norbu strutting proudly along, whilst I was strapped to the back of a yak. It felt awful. I had the weight of England and Oxford on my shoulders, and I was letting the side down. This was meant to be a reflective, spiritual journey, but I wasn't getting it. Even the sacred site of the northern face of Kailash did nothing to ease the pain. I was deeply relieved when we stopped for the night.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
more kujulu. That's like. Oh, this one. Oh, that's. They're called that.
Very good.
Red?
Yeah.
Now I understand that a couple of guys, travel writers from Britain, who would try to go around Kailash, got this far as well, and then had to go in one of those oxygen bags. And had to be casted back down. In a way, that would be bliss, because I know how they feel. But what I'm going to do is stick it out till tomorrow morning, and maybe I'll feel better.
I'd thought that the night's rest would be restorative, but it wasn't. Within an hour of sunrise, I was again lagging behind. And as we passed the glacial source of the Indus River, my legs finally gave out.
Would you want to drink something? Would you like to drink? No.
For the first time this trip, I had to crack open the emergency oxygen supply. We were only halfway round Mount Kailash, but we were a day behind schedule. Norbu had thought it best if I rested to try and acclimatise a bit before taking on the highest part of the journey.
Where is the path? Oh yeah, man.
I've come to rather an alarming conclusion. I couldn't do this on my own. I need Norbu both as a companion and also as a sort of foil to play off. And it's an odd sort of relationship because it is slightly competitive, but yet we both egg each other on. And I certainly want him to do it, and I'm sure he wants me to do it too. But at the same time, if at the toughest phase, Norbu said, "Oh goodness, I just can't go on, I've got to ride a yak for a kilometre or two," I'd think, yes.
The climb to Dol Malar was imminent. I dragged my tainted soul towards the journey's toughest challenge, the Dol Malar Pass.
That's it, the final pass.
Sure. Then we go down.
Then down.
But we will.
It might be possible to ride a yak, mightn't it? I think we've gone About 35 metres up. 35 of 200 is really that much. So there's still quite a way to go.
What on earth was I doing? I was a geographer, not a mountaineer. And yet, had we been on Everest, I would have been 2/3 of the way to the top. Further humiliation came in the form of a day tripper, who, despite having walked 27 kilometers in 6 hours, didn't even appear to be out of breath. Worse still was being taunted by Norbu, who was straddling a rock, looking not unlike someone riding a yak. After 2.5 days of agony, I had arrived at what was the spiritual climax of the pilgrimage. Countless generations of pilgrims had been here before me, leaving behind a gigantic web of prayer.
How's you feeling? Are you okay?
Very terrible.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
How long have you been here, Norby?
Maybe 20 minutes here.
Your faith carried you along, I think.
So from now, we go down the hill.
Downhill all the way?
Yeah.
That's a nice thought. Oh.
But this yadana kırdı. Right?
Norbu and Satan did their bit to book their place as humans in the next life, and thanked their spiritual guardians for a safe passage. I, meanwhile, performed my own little scientific ritual.
It's a little quirk, Norby.
At higher altitudes, the thinner air exerts a lower pressure on water, which means that less energy is required for it to boil. At 5,723 meters, water boils at 75 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, maybe 75.
Oh.
That's all right.
Is that all right? Oh, yeah.
Now, let's have some tea.
Would you like to wash your hair?
Wash my hair? I haven't got any hair.
Baptizing my finger in boiling water gave me both a sense of pride and relief. Pride because I had made it over the Dolma La Pass. Relief because I knew I would never find reason to go as high again.
You know, if Kailash is the navel of the universe,
Right.
I think these women are definitely from another planet. And it puts me to total shame. I've been hurting a lot. But compared to that, well, there's just no comparison at all, is there? Very humbling.
It was 17 kilometers back to Darchan. Thankfully, most of it downhill, following the course of a stream that would eventually feed the Brahmaputra. But that wasn't the end of it. Norbu said that the Kora wasn't over until we'd reached the monastery at Tirthapuri and completed one final test.
I'm quite pleased with myself as a non-Buddhist
That's right.
to have made it.
It's just a question of choosing the right colored stone.
If I get a black one, does that mean I have to do the Kora again?
Yeah, right. Come on. Let me trust, okay? You first or me first?
I think you ought to go first.
Good. Let me see.
A white stone tells you that spiritually, you've scored.
Yeah! Well done. That's it. It really was a proper Kora.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
I'm pretty nervous now. Just to confirm, if I get a black one, I have to go all the way around again. Oh, no. Ah, dearie me. Pray for me, Norby.
Yeah. That's the worst way.
Is that, what is that? That's a black...
You can come through with that. That's okay.
It's not okay. It's a complete disaster. So what did I do wrong?
We didn't do where you go and as the what the Lama says. You always think about your families. That's no problem. That means you have to come back to Tibet.
Yeah.
Yeah, one day. If you pick up the white one, you will never come back.
I like your twist. I like your twist. So it's actually positive. I'm severely disappointed.
Yeah.
Do you want to swap?
Yeah.
Oh, what a horror story. Deary me. A black one. 50-50 chance, eh?
That's
Black or
right.
white?
That's right.